looked around, numbed by the loss of our homes, the wicked Khari took full advantage of our plight. We were rounded up, chained, and put to work.
Many eons ago, a great empire rose from the heart of the lands that would later become Stygia. That empire belonged to the Khari, fierce slavers exercising dominion over the lands. A deeply religious society in the worship of Set, they ruled with cold blade and iron fist, gaining a reputation not only as vicious slavers, but also master craftsmen. Modern historians theorise the Khari gained such a reputation for crafts through theft and assimilation of knowledge held by those they enslaved. Such was their technology, they had managed to infuse a strange essence into steel, creating the strong and easily worked Khari Steel to forge their weapons and armour. Amongst the slaver hierarchy of the Khari lay three core classes. The overseers, managers of the slave trade, forced the legions of slaves to serve, fight, or indeed die for their masters. To fuel the supply chain of slaves, the Khari raiders, black-souled reavers of unabated cruelty. Merely the sight of their snake-headed prows on their helmets would cause villagers to slay their own weak, rather than see them suffer at the hands of the Khari. The soldiers, the lowest rung of the ladder, often made of free-man soldiers that demonstrated exceptional dedication or performance in their servitude. The Khari soldiers would come to play a pivotal role in the future of the Empire. Amongst the many victims of the Khari were the Lemurians, fleeing from the cataclysm that consumed their homelands. The Witch Queen and her people docking weary upon the Stygian coast was taken as an act of aggression and they were enslaved. Whilst a small group of Lemurians, including the Witch Queen, would eventually escape and find the eastern coast of the exiled lands, many remained under the fist of the Khari, with some eventually promoted to the rank of soldier. Whilst the Khari Empire thrived in Stygia for many decades, the nature of empires is one of a rise and a fall was indeed coming for the Khari. As the Khari Empire continually grew their ranks of soldiers, those inducted into the infantry never truly felt free. Many had been taken as slaves, and even with their new designation as free men soldiers, that freedom was but an illusion. They were still firmly within the Khari's grasp. As those ranks grew, a cadre of soldiers began to separate themselves from the rest. These soldiers, it is believed, included Lemurian exiles. As they gained more sway amongst the other soldiers, whispers of rebellion began to spread. Eventually those whispers grew into spoken words and then screams from the bowel of the Empire as revolution sparked. Alongside the soldiers, slaves fought against their masters for freedom to finally pry loose the fingers of the Khari. Whilst the masters may have been better armed and better trained, they were eventually overwhelmed and the Empire began to slowly topple. Seeing the fate that awaited them at the hands of those they had enslaved, a group of Khari loyalists fled the now burning empire, heading westward as the slaves became the new masters, overthrowing and beginning to establish the new beginnings of modern-day Stygia. Sailing westward, the escaping Khari found themselves approaching a strange land. Laying eyes upon the ancient Lemurian architecture enraptured by nature, they continued onwards, not keen on meeting their old foes once more. They passed through the jungle, so infested with trees and beasts, and through the burning heat of the desert, dodging unnatural sandstorms that rolled over the scorched mountains. Eventually, after passing an ancient and surely cursed city, the Khari stumbled upon the last remnants of the Serpent Men. Believing them descended from their snake god Set, the Khari fell in worship, laying the foundations for a great new empire, where Set would surely guide them once again to greatness. The work on the new Khari Empire began slowly, growing over time. Amongst the founders, aspirations grew that they would soon restore their previous empire, and whilst it may take some time, they would surely reach their goal. On yet another regular day in the rapidly growing Khari Empire, the very earth shook beneath their feet, a gargantuan rapture slicing the earth. As the homes and temples began to slowly fall beneath, the Khari couldn't help but think back to Lemuria, to the cataclysm they'd spoken of, and wondered if it had indeed come for them too. Beneath the earth, in a cavern opened and resealed by the great rumblings of the sands, the Khari were enveloped in darkness, with only candles, campfires, and faintly glowing fungus to light the way. Many were crushed beneath the rubble, others wounded and trapped, their screams echoing in the terrible darkness. It appeared that Set had abandoned them. Whilst a great number were killed, some Khari remained. Kor, a mystic and sage, gathered the remaining 1,000 Khari in the remains of the temple district and sent them off to the remnants of their grand library to divine any path of guidance from their books of history. As the search went onwards, the remaining priests sacrificed many of their own to Set, with no luck. Times grew desperate, and in the dim luminescence of the fungus, one Khari found a name within a book: Thag. Thinking it time to turn away from Set as he had from them, the Khari man returned to Kor and suggested summoning Thag. Cannibalism was rampant in the ruins, all of the animals were dead, and even the rocks had been scraped of any fungus, edible or otherwise. The ritual to summon Thag was suggested and shot down. The people were scared, and the priests denounced such a suggestion of apostasy, locking the temple. Regardless of principles, something had to be done. Shattering the doors of the temple and casting out the priests, Kor began the ritual to summon Thag, confident he could control and temper the demon. In the modern age of the exiled lands, upon the ground where the new Khari Empire once stood, the humble city of Sepameru, home of the Relic Hunters. As good-spirited as their archaeological endeavours may be, the Relic Hunters are indeed a greedy kind. No single discovery is ever really enough, and while some were scouring the unnamed city, others chose to look beneath their own feet. Behind the tavern in Waterside, through a door and into the wine cellar, the Relic Hunters stumbled upon a grand discovery. Within a gargantuan, gloomy cavern, the remains of an enormous kingdom sat in ruins. Whilst the Relic Hunters haven't delved too deeply yet, they've still lost many of their rank. Perhaps it's for the best, as what lays beyond amongst the dim glow of the fungus is truly horrific. Between the blood-spattered bricks, lashed in darkness, horrid undead husks still roam the ruins of their old city. Skeletal beasts stalk the cramped avenues and fractured streets, and scattered throughout the city, we find the Khari remnants. The cursed husks of those unfortunate enough to be involved with summoning Thag have been doomed to unending torment, and as their flesh and muscle slowly decays in this dark cave, through some forbidden magic, they will continue on. Notes recovered from the ruins detail the fall of the new Khari Empire, the desperation of those who survived, and the failure of the summoning ritual. Thag had broken loose of his bindings, slaughtered the priests and anyone else within the city. A small group had managed to escape, including Kor and the unnamed author of these age-worn notes. As the city drowned in blood and darkness, Kor thought deeply. He believed he could reverse the ritual at the temple, but his efforts failed, and Thag claimed everyone within the ruined city. Looming at the far side of that city, the temple Kor returned to. Here, if one were to light the campfires, the summoning ritual would begin anew. If that someone were powerful enough to defeat Thag, nothing would change. Those cursed remnants of the Khari would not be freed by the death of the demon, their undead husks forced to walk the streets of their ruined empire until the world itself burns out and dies. As the Relic Hunters begin their incursion into the ruined city, the curse of Thag still lingers on those fractured streets. Should they summon him once more, they will surely join the ranks of those cursed husks that linger on beneath the earth. Thanks for watching. The Khari are a group I touched on briefly in my Witch Queen video, though at the time I didn't realise they had such a fleshed out story. I hope you've enjoyed the video. I definitely enjoyed delving into this surprisingly deep and intricate tale. As always, a massive thank you to our wonderful, esteemed coffee cultists for continuing to support the channel over on Patreon. Again, thanks for watching, take care, and I'll see you soon.